Welcome to today's interview with Bob Leek, Deputy CIO, Multnomah County, Oregon. I'm James Baker with the Public Sector Technology Exchange. For those of you not familiar with the Public Sector Technology Exchange, we're an independent forum and we discuss the technology challenges impacting government, industry, and education. You can learn more about us on the web or in your favorite social media venue. As I mentioned earlier, I'm so excited to have Bob here with me on the studio. Bob was actually going to join us back on March 9th for the Prevent, Detect, and Respond Security Forum, and he wasn't able to make it. He agreed to come back in the studio today. I have a handful of questions for him. And in the event that you didn't get a chance to watch the Prevent, Detect, and Respond discussion, I encourage you to go out and do it. It was one of our more riveting and compelling discussions about the state of protecting government and education, both on-site and in the cloud. You can watch that on YouTube. The link is on your screen. It is now my pleasure to have Bob here with me today. Bob, kind of just take a few minutes and introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, I appreciate the chance to come back, Jimmy. I currently work at Multnomah County, which is in Oregon. Most people will know that as where Portland is. I have been in this area for about 18 years. I've spent some time with Kaiser Permanente in my past, with Banfield the Pet Hospital, and many folks will remember an organization called Egghead. I worked there during the whole .com era and really got a grounding in how to turn 12 months worth of work and get it done in 3 months. Through that whole .com era and timing. The role I have now is as the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the county. That gives me day-to-day accountability for about 165 people, ensuring that the technology we use here at the county to deliver services to the public is highly available, up and running, and we cover many aspects of those services that include we're the 7th largest healthcare provider in this market. We run 3 detention centers or jails. We support the Sheriff's Office and the District Attorney's Office. We provide human services, the Multnomah County Library Service, animal shelter, and so forth. So it's, as I like to describe, it's like working for 10 companies all at the same time, all with their own unique needs, all coming together to leverage technology for better outcomes.
Thanks, Bob. And I tell you, for everyone listening, I love this first line. I believe that technology and operation leadership work best together, creating the conditions for success by delivering on the promise of leveraging technology for better outcomes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. One of the first questions that I have for you is about the dark web. Like many people around the country, I watch a lot of TV shows, and we always see a hacker going into the dark web and creating some kind of havoc and being able to do all kinds of magical things with their laptop. But the dark web is serious business. You can buy ransomware as a service on it right now, and you all just recently had a situation where someone was accessing the dark web from one of your county libraries. Could you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, it was a first of its kind detection that we had, at least in our environment. A few years ago, and I'll touch on this I think a little bit later as well, we began to make some investments in our detection capabilities. And one of the tools that we put in place allows us to watch for activity to certain types of sites, be they identified as malicious sites by some of the services that do that categorization, IP addresses that are known to be malicious, and so forth. And a warning came in, actually 2 warnings came in within a few minutes of each other from 2 different branches at the library. And we support 19 public library branches, and it helps to close what we call the digital divide between the public's ability to utilize technology, the internet and websites and those sorts of things like applying for jobs, etc. We provide over 900 unique devices for the public in those 19 branches. And so we had some detection software that we run on those as part of a standard image, and they fired 2 alerts within a few minutes of each other. rapid response on our operations side. We contact the library branch. We let them know, and it was a tough topic to introduce. We told the branch manager, it seems that there's someone on a public access computer that's accessing the dark web. We'd like to make sure that there's not malicious activity going on.
And let me ask you a quick question on that. So for everyone listening in, many people have not been out on the dark web. Did these people just Google it? Was there a special way they got in when you got those alerts? Talk a little bit about what the dark web is and why there needs to be concern with it.
Yeah, and it might be it's too far of a stretch to call this a Star Wars reference that there's a light web and a dark web, but on the dark web, you alluded to it earlier as well. You see it now in social media, certainly TV shows, movies. Some of my favorites kind of touch on this topic. And what's available out there is frankly a lot of bad stuff. If you've got a few dollars and a credit card, you can go out and buy credit card numbers or other people's personal information. The dark web houses a subculture around tools, code, applications that would help someone hack into a system. I have gone on to Google and YouTube and asked, how can I get into an iPhone, for instance? How can I jailbreak an iPhone? And there are videos out there, but on the dark web, you get tutorials and you get access to professionals. As if you wanted to send them a box of phones, and they would send that back to you with the ability to access the data and the information on those phones. And so, the name dark web, I think, is indicative that it's probably not something good, and it's something that we felt that we wanted to keep an eye out for. Mainly, our use case was around accidental use, or employees using county equipment for things that they weren't supposed to. This case with the library kind of surprised us a little bit. And so when we talked to the branch manager, we asked her, we could tell her exactly which PC was being utilized, and we asked her to go and follow up and check in to see what was happening. And she came back to us after a few minutes and said, yeah, I've talked to the patron. That's what we call a library visitor. I've talked to the patron, and they shared with us that they were curious what the dark web is, and had talked to some friends of theirs who had given them a couple of web addresses, and they decided that with the availability of a public computer at our library branch that they would go out and take a look, and for their own purpose and discovery, find out a little bit more about what this dark web actually is. And that then became the consistent story from both of the patrons, because remember, these were two different library branches.
Right.
They were satisfying their own curiosity around the dark web.
And I tell you, I would be worried about, malicious intent with someone trying to do something. So it was just, a situation where someone just had, curiosity and wanted to know and figured they'd go into one of your libraries and, access it there. Interesting.
Yeah, and really no different than being curious about anything. The libraries, for at least Multnomah County Library, has been around for 150 years. We just celebrated that anniversary a couple of years ago. We're a place to satisfy one's curiosity. Google has certainly taken a lead role in that and is a threat as a disruptive innovator for what library services are. But the core of what we do at the library is still to provide information to the public in a way that's curated, that helps them navigate through 2.5 million Google search results with more relevant materials and easier access to things that we can provide to them. And so we treated that situation, it turned out, good in this situation where it was satisfying one's curiosity. And I'm happy to know that our detection equipment is keeping an eye on people accessing the dark web. And we've had no additional hits against any dark web sites up to this point.
Well, and that was actually my next question. I wanted to know, if you go out into the dark web, does all of a sudden, we use the Star Wars reference jokingly, but does Darth Vader's force know that you've entered the dark web and you're looking at it, and they can come look for you? And you can't get access to Yoda or lightsaber, you're in trouble.
I think the references that have been made that once you're on the dark web that something bad is going to happen to you is a little bit of a misnomer. It's what is more likely to happen is, say, a phishing attempt or a spear phishing attempt where you get an email that looks like it came from your IT department or your payroll department or your bank, and you're asked to put in some of your personally identifiable information, and you click on the link, and then something bad happens. Just going on the dark web is just an activity. It's just hitting another set of websites. It doesn't inherently then automatically download a virus and turn your computer into something that becomes part of a denial of service attack for some corporation somewhere. You still have to take an action, but the name dark web has been applied to, this is an area where you can't just Google and end up on the dark web. You kind of have to know where you're trying to go. And so that's the distinction between the dark web and not. And Jimmy, if you wanted to go out on the dark web, you're welcome to try it. Just be careful on what you click on.
I hear that, and I think I'm going to stay away from the dark side for right now. You know, one of the questions with the Public Sector Technology Exchange, I talk to many, many people in government, higher education, and K through 12. And one thing they all agree on is that it's not a question anymore if your organization is going to get breached, but when. And a lot of times, the big issue is that someone can breach an organization, and depending which report you read or where you look at, someone can be in your network for a minimum of 3 months before you even pick up they're there. So my question for you, we read article after article about organizations that get held for, that they get ransom. They say, hey, do a Bitcoin payment. I know at the event we did a couple weeks ago, Rick Howard with Palo Alto Networks talked about the granny scam where hackers were getting grandmothers taking pictures of their grandkids and cats and then getting them to pay them Bitcoin and go after them. So that's just an example of a consumer. But all throughout the country, we read stories of organizations that get breached, they get ransomed. And my question for you is, what is the best response when you do get ransomed? We all believe it's a question of not if, but when. So what should be the appropriate response?
Yeah, this is a question that faces us quite frequently when we're talking within our own organization here at the county, or when we interact with the public. This question tends to come up. And I was at an event last year, and this question was posed to maybe 300 people in an audience. This was an event down in LA that I had attended, and there were 3 answers. The question was, have you been ransomed as an organization, and what was your response? And a group of people raised their hand and said, yes, we've been ransomed, and here's what we did. There was another group of people that raised their hand and said, no, we've never been ransomed. But the vast majority of the people in the room didn't raise their hand one way or the other, and that was indicative of the fact that if you indicate that you've been ransomed, you might become a target. And if you indicate you haven't been ransomed, you might become a target. And if you don't answer the question at all, then maybe it's a little bit of head in the sand and hoping that no one noticed that you didn't answer that question. Mm-hmm. Our answer to this question is something that we're working on now, and we frankly have now treated cybersecurity breaches, and we've started to categorize them, and ransom breach is in a category that for us is the equivalent of declaring a disaster. Many organizations have a situational awareness group that might be made up of some senior leaders and some subject matter experts. I like to say that when something happens along those lines here at the county, we flash the bat signal, which says, drop what you're doing, here's a webinar or web link, a phone number, and an on-site location. We need to get together and talk about what's happening. And in today's environment, that might be a fire in downtown Portland, or it might be a protest that's gotten out of control, or it might be a newspaper article that's coming to light that might not paint the county in as positive a light as what we intend to have on a regular basis. What we've added to that is this aspect of cybersecurity that says, I am now within my rights to notify the situational awareness group that an event has occurred and that we need to get together to talk about our response. And then particularly about ransom, the research that I've done and the folks that I've talked to, there really are three ways to react. So what should your response be? And the beauty of this is I believe each organization should decide how to evaluate a set of criteria, get the right people in the room, and almost have a predisposed plan. It's like when we know the snow is coming to Portland, we position the plows, we put some sand out, we begin to notify the public as to which areas will probably be impacted. It's all about being prepared for when the event happens so that you just execute on a plan. And the three flavors around ransomware are, I'll always pay it because I'm worried that I won't get my data back or that there's an impact to my day-to-day operations. I'll never pay it and I'll deal with it. I'll restore from a backup. If it's widespread, I may turn a service off. We may take our website down, make an application unavailable. Or third, I'll handle it on a case-by-case basis. And we're currently at a place where we handle things on a case-by-case basis. When something happens, we evaluate the impact, maybe how much the ransom might be being asked for, how easy would it be for us to restore from a backup. If it's our if it's our NAS file storage array where we store things in shared file folders, we back that up on a continuous basis and we can restore back to a point, maybe an hour or two old. That's not a big impact as opposed to, say, a website that's being held hostage that single moms depend on for eligibility for services, for instance. So our approach right now is kind of case by case, but the tenet of that approach is that we have a plan. And I think that would be the most important place for most organizations to start.
I agree with you. The case by case is where I would lean. For instance, you may actually want to know where someone got through and who they are, and you have a moment to learn more about it. But then there are other cases. I was reading an article the other day. I think it was the city of Sarasota, Florida, and they got ransomed. And it was very detrimental to them. But basically, I think they had Veeam or somebody, Veeam backing up all their stuff, and they were able to get their information really quick and just tell the ransom people to go fly a kite. And then there are other times where, like you said, you may want to learn more about whom this is and what they're doing. And you had talked about healthcare, and I've spent a good bit of my time around that whole fraud and abuse arena, and it is just overwhelming the amount of criminal targets that are looking for that. So I agree. I agree with that. We had over the past few years, we've had some excellent guests just like you, but and you can watch these on the PST website. But we had Mike Rowling on, CISO for state of Missouri. He talked about the Ferguson issue. Back at Christmas time, we had Daniel Bordeaux on with the city of Westland, Michigan, and big city outside of Detroit. And he was talking about one of the things that they've also done there is they've created a culture where you don't get a finger pointed at you because you made a mistake. I mean, all of us have opened something we probably shouldn't have mistakenly. And he said he gave an example where they had a foreign entity attacking their systems, and they were able to cut the attack off. It had come through their fire department, and because someone said, "Hey, I think I just put my hand in the cookie jar and I need some help," and like I said, it's really case by case by how you want to deal with it. But I find with a lot of people, ransomware is one of the biggest issues that they are dealing with.
Right. Yeah, we've had a similar situation in one of our administrative offices where we have detection equipment looking for what we might call high chattering or high talking end user devices. And one of those fired, and our operations folks did some investigation into that, and we discovered that there was some encryption happening on one of our file servers. And we immediately got in touch with a desktop field tech, honed them in on which PC it was that was doing this. It was an unoccupied PC at the time, and the remediation was yank the network cable out of the wall, which immediately stopped the client PC talking to the server, And then we have some work to do to restore from that backup. But again, I think it is these scenarios, while they continue to have permutations, there's a good place for most organizations to start and to learn from other organizations, references like what you were saying with professionals who have been through this, is to say, what happened to you and how did you deal with it? And then to begin to build their own incident response plan.
Right. No, great response to that. So now I want to talk about what everything comes down to, the almighty dollar and budgets and you know, I think a lot of people, you know, we travel in the IT community. We always hear the phrases doing more with less, shrinking IT budgets and all that. But the reality is you need to, you know, get ready to fight. It's coming at you. So what I'd like you to talk a little bit, I know that you all recently submitted your agency's budget for next year. And you really began sort of a cyber awareness a few years ago. So what I'd like you to talk to our audience about a little bit is what's important for someone listening in today, no matter where they are, you know, whether they're just getting started, they have minimal investment, or where do they need to go. And I'm going to put up on the screen, and I'll let you explain to this. This is a link Bob sent me of his overview of you know, their technology goals and what their focus is for the upcoming year, and you can click on the link to watch that. But Bob, kindly talk about that a little bit more in terms of, and I'll flip back to the question real quick, you know, what is important for anyone listening to today's interview to put into their future budgets to combat cyber criminals?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. It's much the same as making any investment. And so we start with a set of what are our long-term goals and principles, and how would we evaluate any project for making an investment in. And that's the next slide after this one, where we have pre-established and predetermined some guiding principles around modernization, resilience, and security. And so, like any high-performing organization, you'll have strategic plans, you'll have a sense of what success looks like, why do we do the business that we do, and there are thousands of things that are competing for priority and that almighty dollar that you referenced to. For us, we've kind of honed them down for a period of time that started a couple of years ago and is going to carry us, I think, for a couple of more years around these three principles, and then some selection criteria to have it qualify as a capital project. We have followed a pretty simple approach in the overall scheme of things. We decided we would go out and find a framework that would help us navigate the thousands of topics within cybersecurity, let's say. And on the next slide here, specific to our cybersecurity program, we outlined about a 5-year life cycle for our cybersecurity efforts. And we started to, so where we started is, let's go grab a framework. And we chose to go to NIST and pull down one of their frameworks, along with some evaluation criteria of our current state. We borrowed some resources from Gartner and Infotech Research Group, maybe another couple of organizations. We pulled together a stakeholder group, both internally and a couple of external folks, and said, let's come up with a 5-year program. And so we mapped that program out, talked about what our future state would look like, and then kind of prioritized which of these is most important to us, so that we could tune in the fact that we're a county and that our needs might be different than, let's say, a manufacturing organization or an education services organization like higher ed or something along those lines. There are some things that are unique to us. So using the framework and agreeing on who we are and assessing the future state, we then started to take a look at our current state. And what you see here are a list of accomplishments that we will have done by the end of this fiscal year around the firewall and some vulnerabilities, our email systems, et cetera, and what our plans for next year are. And this certainly isn't everything that we're doing. These are categories of areas. But what we have is a 5-year plan informed by experts, against who we are and what success looks like, and a list of areas, and then a way to measure when we're done, what did we get done. And I have a couple of infographics that we did a couple of years ago, very small font, but lots of things on it. And I asked the experts, put in red everything that you feel are our vulnerabilities. And now 3 years later, there's a lot less red on the document. There's a lot more green and yellow are things that we have in flight, but there's new red things. And so my last point about these investments is, certainly in cybersecurity, it's going to continue for a period of time over the next few years. So there's some constant vigilance that needs to happen around that.
Well, and one of the things I thought you brought up here that we get, as I mentioned to everyone listening, we just recently hosted the Prevent, Detect, and Respond: Securing Government and Education on-site and in the Cloud webinar. And one of the big issues, people talk about when you have modernization, there is a lot of government that's dealing with legacy or end-of-life systems, and and then it's like you talk about here, your whole movement into the cloud and how you do it. So this side, I really like this, having guiding principles, selecting your criteria, and then moving forward with it. And I like your comment about new red, less red. I think that's a really good, because like you said, with all the people I interview through the Public Sector Technology Exchange, every one of them has a different story of where the attacks come from. It's not like hey, here's the standard attack and how you do it. One of the other questions I have for you, and I know you're out near Portland. I'm out near Sacramento, and recently in San Francisco they had the RSA conference, and you go there, and there's hundreds of vendors. Everyone, some are Gartner Quadrant, some aren't. But when you're looking at that solution, and we've had this question come in, how do you really pick and choose what you're going to do? Is it just kind of going back and knowing that getting your guiding principles and finding who matches that? I know, and then I'll pause for a moment to answer. I know, we had Gary Hayslip on the event a couple weeks ago. And Gary used a lot of startup companies to work with them, and he'd share the city's data, was able to do that. But, ultimately, when you're picking solutions, there's a lot of different components to a secure solution. How do you, was it just getting a hold of these guiding principles and then matching up, who best helps you achieve that?
Yeah, I think, to the audience that we're speaking to, if there's one thing government has in spades, it tends to be procurement process and methodologies. And so we are still beholden to a set of standards and expectations around who we choose to do business with. And so that's certainly going to be an additional piece to this, because at the RSA conference, or I was at the Health Information Management Systems Society, that's HIMSS, their annual conference in Orlando 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and to walk from one end to the other, it takes 18 minutes. That's right at a mile, and there's 8 of those rows. So 8 square miles of vendors trying to sell solutions. How we go through that is, I kind of described a little bit of it, but we talk about what does our future look like, and we're unapologetic about what we think success should be and how we're going to measure that success. And so rather than solutions looking for problems, we come to those suppliers and say, this is the problem we're trying to solve. And we try and narrow the focus to something very specific and concrete, so that if we make an investment, we'll be successful when we're done with that. And my best example right now about that is in the middle of our FY 2017 scope, which is a security awareness program. We know that the weakest link in any of these security programs is the human being. If we didn't have to deal with humans, we might be a little better off. But the fact is, we provide services to the public, and so dealing with humans is a part and parcel of what we have to do. I don't think our industry is going to be disruptively innovative with a bunch of robotics, for instance. But those humans are susceptible to phishing campaigns and links that are sent to them and attachments that they shouldn't open and those sorts of things. And so we put together what success would look like and then asked several organizations, can you help us with a security awareness program? And we ended up choosing a partner to work with, and we are now in a second phase of doing phishing awareness programs. So we've now done some purposeful phishing within the organization. We've done 2 rounds of that. Our first round showed about a 35% or so click-through rate of people clicking on a bad link because we wrote some really, really crafty emails with help from this organization that we're partnered with. Then we do a follow-up with some security awareness training. We have some people watch some videos, take some quick Q&A, take a little game and so forth. And then a few weeks later, we phish them again. And we have seen that through that simple 3-step program, we've cut for most of the departments by half those that click through the second time they're phished.
Wow, say that one more time.
So we phish we phish a department, then we do a training program, and then we phish them again. And the second time we phish a group that saw the training program, half the people click through. So on the average, from 35% down to about 16%
Wow.
the second time we do a phishing experiment.
You know, it's interesting. A couple weeks ago when we had the panel discussion, Proofpoint put out a report called the Human Factor. And like you said, it's human beings. We're all flawed and we make mistakes. But what's really interesting, several of our panelists were very heavily focused on security awareness, from 4th graders in elementary school to senior citizens at public library. Elaine Starkey with Delaware, they even do a food truck day where they get people to come out, eat food, and then they pitch them on, this is what you need to be aware of and what the dangers are. So that is staggering, though, that you cut things in half. And like you're saying, we're seeing a lot of things in spear phishing and people getting into emails where a lot of it's coming through. So that's quite an achievement for your organization.
Yeah, the follow-up now is that now that we've gone through 2 rounds of that, the security folks have come to me and said, we'd now like to sponsor that we, through HR, we make security awareness programming mandatory, our training mandatory for folks that have clicked through twice. Once is bad enough. Twice means you may not be getting the story. And then they share the unfortunate news that I'm the pilot person for that program because I clicked through twice. Our second email was, congratulations, you've been awarded 2 extra days of vacation. Now, who wouldn't want 2 more days of vacation? Just click this link. And I clicked the link, and sure enough, it was a phishing experiment. So I get to pilot now the mandatory training program. Nothing like leading from the front.
That I got to tell you, though, that is... it's not just you. We had on last year. We did an event in Sacramento, and we had a CIO from Sac State, and they were talking just that same thing, how someone tried to get a hold of things through email and take control. But I like that you're out training people because it's very easy. It's very simple. Even right now in the world, you'll get more emails and calls about the IRS because everyone has. We have taxes due in a few weeks, but I'm sorry that I still think they should give you the extra 2 days of vacation, though.
Thanks for that.
I like that. Well, Bob, I want to thank you so much for coming on today's interview. You were just riveting. I'm hoping that I can get you back on one of our panels this year. We would sure like to have you on. This recording that I'm doing, I'm going to make this available on demand. It'll be on the PSTE's website. And if anyone listening to us today, if you'd like to learn more about the PSTE, join us as a panelist, participate in an interview, or sponsor or form, my contact information's on the screen. On behalf of the Public Sector Technology Exchange, I want to thank Bob Leek, Deputy CIO for Multnomah County, Oregon. I'm James Baker. Make it a great day.